dolls hooting at my place? Got two of them outside the window. Okay.
No, but I wish I did.
Are they in a tree or are they under your roof?
They're in a tree, but close by. This is the time of year they're really getting to know each other. So
it looks like we're live. Welcome everyone. There's always kind of a weird delay going on, so hopefully you're seeing us. My name is Lori DeCare and I'm hosting our conversation tonight. We are here on Facebook Live and Zoom, and we're going to, the way this works is that I do an introduction to the subject. Tonight we're going to talk about short-term rentals, and then we'll show a short film. I can't remember how long it is, maybe like 7 minutes. And then after that, I'll introduce our speaker, our guest, Chris Runyon, a member of Protect Boise Neighborhoods. And then he'll talk and we'll have some interaction, and then the floor will be open for questions or discussion. So with that, shoot, I meant to do this. With that, I'm going to introduce the film and the topic, and we'll go from there. So in just over a decade, Airbnb has transformed cities around the world. Its platform now counts some 500 million guest stays in 81,000 cities. But the company's rapid growth has also fueled a caustic debate about urban inequality. Airbnb, whose stated mission is to, quote, democratize travel by allowing anyone to belong anywhere, quote unquote, argues that it provides an economic equalizer, helping even hosts a few means to boost incomes and manage otherwise unaffordable housing costs. Yet a growing army of critics allege that in cities around the world, the proxy hotel service more often does the opposite, hyper-accelerating affordable housing crisis and gentrification patterns that force out local residents. Like other Silicon Valley industry disrupting corporations, Airbnb virtually redefined a decades-old industry overnight. Through the magic of the internet, suddenly anyone with a spare room could become a hotelier. A few years after the company started in San Francisco in 2008, tourists could choose from hundreds or thousands of non-traditional hotel options in nearly every city in the world. But as the platform has expanded beyond the proverbial homeowner with a spare room, and instead has morphed into increasingly profit-driven investors who buy and then rent out entire homes, it has also put a new squeeze on housing markets. Multiple major studies have shown that short-term rentals lead to a rise in rents and reduction in affordable housing for local workers. It found a 10% increase in Airbnbs in a city leads to a 0.4 increase in rents, according to a study of 100 US cities published in July. Particularly for renters in high-demand cities, Airbnb can increasingly feel like a digital kind of grim reaper. In Toronto, the platform has eliminated some 6,500 homes for the city's badly pinched housing market. In Boston, longtime residents of Chinatown, a dense neighborhood that became this epicenter of the city's gentrification battle, are being displaced by overseas speculators who buy property at inflated prices only to turn around and list it on the site. Here in Boise, the explosive growth and accompanying skyrocketing costs have created an acute crisis in the rental market, with short-term rentals removing critical affordable housing stock via the over 800 to 1,200 short-term rentals that have been counted within Boise city limits. A search of Airbnb shows hundreds of Boise spaces available for rent on the site, from boutique hotel-like condo, beautiful bench bungalow, and kindred cottage in the North End. The other big players, Vacasa, which coincidentally has a large office here in Boise and boasts over 600 units and 500 billion in net revenue in 2020, and VRBO provides tourists hundreds more options. Meanwhile, Boise renters are facing an unprecedented shortage of available and affordable housing. The rental vacancy rate in the city dipped to below 2% in 2020, compared with 8% in 2009, and in only 1 year, over 2020, during a pandemic, Boise had the highest rent increase in the entire nation, of 12%, and overall rents have increased over 24% in just 3 years. Those who can't pay are forced out of their homes, fueling an eviction, displacement, and homelessness crisis we are all too familiar with. While Airbnb likes to depict small mom and pop operators in places that have long been studied, like New York, the top 10% of hosts earn nearly 50% of all revenue. We are not talking about people renting from their primary residence, but instead real estate investors with multiple properties maximizing their available units at the expense of residents. Because of underlying home ownership patterns and who has access to capital, most revenues are disproportionately spread among a demographic that already skews both white and wealthy. It's really the rich who are getting richer. Tonight's short video by HuffPost is a snapshot of short-term rentals' effects on New Orleans. Like Boise, residents in New Orleans say that their neighbors are vanishing, pushed out by rapid Airbnb-created gentrification that is hollowing out their neighborhoods and, ironically, the very culture that tourists seek. New Orleans has always been a tourist town, but Airbnb and other short-term rentals threaten that authenticity in a new way. And I will share my screen, we'll watch the video, and then we'll come back and have a discussion.
Where else in the world can you go to experience the food, the culture, the music, the architecture, the old world charm that we have? To use task knowledge on how to preserve and keep the culture intact.
New Orleans is such an important place culturally and such an important city. It's hard to watch your neighborhood start to empty out. It's hard to lose neighbors on the corner and then watch them get replaced by a revolving cast of folks from California or, you know, Illinois or Florida in town for a bachelor party. But more importantly, I think access to housing is like a moral issue.
My name is Alton Osborne. I am a clothing designer, bakery owner, Airbnb host. Hey, give me a hand with that. All right.
Apple. Justin.
How you doing, man?
Nice to
Alton.
meet
Who are you?
I'm Caitlin.
Hey,
Nice
Caitlin.
to
How you
meet
do? I've had nearly 200 guests, and it's been all 5-star ratings. I mean, I really try to keep people happy and show them the real city. I made an addition onto my house. So we weren't looking for any roommates or anything. It was just, Airbnb or the short-term rentals were becoming a thing. I take pride in the space that I've created. It's 24 days out of the month.
I think we always try to find the cheapest option. We just kind of like to see what's available outside of like the normal things people would first check out.
Definitely, and it's like really a matter of value too. You know, super cool people to live here, and it's in a cool neighborhood, so that's nice too. Like, you're not going to get that staying in a Hyatt.
I've worked as an artist all my life, and having this space, for rent and available to persons to visit and stay in New Orleans, I've no longer struggled to make my mortgage. As an artist, it's always been a challenge. And again, I'm really quite comfortable. It's afforded us to open the bakery. My wife's longtime dream was to do this. Living the dream. I must know at least 10 people in the neighborhood that are doing it. Actually all of them live on the property. And so it's either a double where they live on one side and rent the other, or nobody that I know is doing the whole house. All those guys are absentee landlords. I think it sucks. I mean, I think that the whole house rentals are, again, takes away the any sense of neighborhood. It's such a twofold thing. As a resident, it's a little disconcerting. As a businessman, those folks got to have coffee.
So the purple one is an Airbnb, the yellow one is an Airbnb, 3 units. Down this way, there's a huge house that was a 3-unit house that had a man in a wheelchair. It was an accessible unit. They all got evicted. A couple from California bought it. Now it's a Airbnb. So my name is Brianne Dedecker. I am the program manager for Jane Place Neighborhood Sustainability Initiative, a tenant rights advocacy organization and a housing advocacy organization. The average whole home rental in Airbnb right now goes for around $290 a night. And if you think about what rents are, even at the expensive rents that we now have, the average New Orleanian would only be paying $42 per night to live in that same housing unit. So the economic incentive is just so high that there really are folks who are capitalizing and taking advantage of the city. Airbnb and a lot of folks want to pretend that the folks using this service are people in need who are renting out a single home in their apartment. And I believe that you should be protected, and I believe people should be able to do that in order to make ends meet. But only 13% of users in the city are folks who are renting out a spare room in their house. 75% are actually entire homes. In New Orleans, we know that there's 813 hosts that have more than one whole home listing. And between those 813 hosts, they cover over 2,000 listings. So nearly half of the listings on Airbnb are people who rent out more than one house. The top 10 hosts on Airbnb have over 300 units between them. That's commercial operation. That's not folks in need. And I think it's extremely offensive when you hear advocates for short-term rentals hiding behind people in need who really do need to make a little bit of extra money, hiding behind their stories to mask the fact that they are making massive profits and displacing people from New Orleans.
My name is John Ford, but all my life, most of my life, people have called me Deacon John Ford. I am the president of the New Orleans Musicians Union. The effect of short-term rentals is that it makes housing unaffordable for musicians and artists. Because in order to maintain a viable culture and keep it alive and pass it down from generation to generations, we all need to live in a community of housing where, I can go next door and teach this kid over here how, we do the second line marching, or teach them how to sew a Mardi Gras Indian costume, or teach them the culture in general. The poor people, they're the ones who perpetuate this culture. And when they're forced to live in communities outside of the city, outside of the state, well, we have the cultural diaspora that occurs. We're all going to die. And if we don't teach this culture to the younger generation coming up, well, the culture will disappear.
Okay, so we're back. Hi for folks who are just joining us. Oh, I left that thing running. Hold on. There was one more thing to do. Okay, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
I can. It's Betty.
Okay, hi Betty.
Hi.
We just watched a little film about New Orleans and the effect of Airbnbs on the rental market there. And then I'm going to introduce Chris Runyon. He's one of the members of Protect Boise Neighborhoods. ProtectBoiseNeighborhoods.org is their home on the internet. If you want to check it out and become a member, I highly recommend that. And then Chris is going to talk a little bit, and then I'm going to ask some questions, and then we'll go from there. Should I start with the questions, Chris, or do you want to start with an intro?
You can go ahead and start with the questions. I think yeah.
Okay, great. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what Protect Boise Neighborhoods is?
Yeah, so, thanks, Lori, for having me. So my name is Chris Runyon. I grew up in Boise. Like a lot of people that grew up here, I moved away for quite a while. Didn't really think I was coming back because there was a lot better places to live in. But now I did move back. I've been back for about 10 years, and you start going, wow, this is a kind of a special place. So anyways, I live here now. I'm a homeowner, and that's a little bit about me. Protect Boise Neighborhoods came about 6 months ago. I was informed that my neighbor's house was going to get converted into an investor-owned Airbnb. So this wasn't my neighbor wanting to rent their house out occasionally or rent a room out. This was literally the house next to me, which the person that lived there before that was there for about 8 years, was one of the best neighbors. This is what I'm getting, I hear, and it's like, immediately for my wife and I and 2 kids, it was quite a thought to think that our neighborhood that we know essentially everyone here was about to change. And when I started looking around, I noticed, wow, there were some other ones in our neighborhood already. And these weren't people living in their home, renting their home out. These were people investing in these homes and essentially running them as a hotel. So talking with neighbors, pretty easy to get people concerned. And through talking with homeowners as well as renters in our area, we said, hey, maybe we should do a web page. This was all new to me, and a lot of my neighbors were not. Once you dive into this subject, you learn a lot. And but for us, it was like, hey, are we crazy? I mean, this seems weird that people would want this to happen. So we created this website, and through that, we've gotten supporters. So we're at 100 supporters now, and we're just hoping to bring up this conversation and be heard on our concerns.
Okay, great. Next question. Most people are aware of platforms such as Airbnb and VRBO offering short-term reservations, but might not be aware of who owns these types of properties. Can you share what you know about this topic?
Yeah. So, like I said, before 6 months ago, I knew there were Airbnbs, and I thought it was a great way of people making money, which it is. But there are a couple different people that do this. One is your classic homeowner. That's who Airbnb or any kind of platform like that is going to put up on their advertisement, and that's a person that occasionally rents out a home or a room, and it actually can help a person stay in their home. I've met people now that with the rising costs in Boise in particular, it's allowing them to stay. And you know what? That's a positive. That's how Airbnb started, was a guy literally renting his couch. And but like so many things, when there's money to be made, we're all human. We people jump in. And so now we have these investor-owned Airbnbs. So you can see them by, if you know of an Airbnb, you can go on Ada County assessors, and you can look at who owns it. Is it under a name? Is it an LLC? Is it under something else? And those are investor-owned short-term rentals, and that's what the supporters of Protect Boise Neighborhoods have concern with. And you can kind of, well, you saw it from that New Orleans movie. When left unchecked, it can really impact and essentially completely alter a neighborhood from a place of community for people to live and work to essentially a tourist destination. And those investor-owned ones that's really where the big problem is. So, what I'm seeing is there's people that own one, there's people that own multiple ones, there's people that have money to invest for other people, and they're doing that as well. It's getting really large. They can live in another state. They're served by like these analytical data websites such as AirDNA. So if I'm an investor, I can Google, let's just throw out Boise, Idaho. And if I do that, I can see the occupancy rate, I can see the average income per month. And then I can say, well, you know what? I have some money to put somewhere. I'm going to go for that. And so there's a whole business out there. And those, so that's the two types. I want to touch on, because when I first started this and I started looking into it, and once I got to where it was an investor coming in, and when that was taken away from the long-term housing stock, I would say to people, hey, investors are buying, like people that don't even live here are buying homes and turning them into short-term rentals. And sometimes people are like thinking I was crazy. So I think it helps to do a little math. So when you look at the Boise market, if I go to realtor.com, it says that the year-on-year increase in median home prices in Boise was 20%. And the median price of a home is $437,000. So that 20% in 1 year equates to $83,000. Okay. So if I was an investor last year, I bought a home for median, and I own the home now, I have an increase of 20%. But as an investor, you have a couple options. You can either just let it sit there, which I don't think that's happening in Boise. It is happening in other places. But I think what more likely is doing is they're either doing long-term or short-term. And when you look at the two, the short-term, you can get more money. And so using AirDNA data, and that was published in a Boise Dev article just recently, written about Boise short-term rentals. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend reading it. So I'm just going to use their numbers. You come up with $30,000 a year. So if I was an investor and I had $350,000 to put somewhere, essentially I could have bought a home last year. I would have gained 20%, and I would have gained the $30K in short term. So I would have generated $110,000 of increased value. And that is why they are doing it. And when I see articles that are such in the Idaho Statesman, here's one right here, March 1st, and it says, and I'm telling you this because I think a lot of people go, no, you're crazy, man. No, people don't do this. But in this article, it says a home in the North End was listed for $350,000. They had 10 offers. Many of those were cash, including 3 that were at $420,000. So that's $70,000 over asking, and it is in cash. Well, it says the 3 that were in cash, the deciding factor was that the higher offers were cash, but they were all investors. And actually, quite noble, the person that owned the home ended up selling the home to a person that was going to live in it at $12,000 less. So this is a thing. It's happening, and I just want to make that point clear. So those are the two types. And I want to make very, very clear that Protect Boise Neighborhoods, we don't have a problem with homeowners, and that's where we need to push the conversation past. This is not about homeowners renting rooms or homeowners renting their home out. It's about investors.
So we haven't had this problem before. We have several people on the phone and other people who aren't muted. So for folks who aren't muted, until you are speaking, will you mute yourself? Because we're having where the video is flashing to you or a picture of your phone number, which you probably don't want. So for folks who are on the phone, maybe just like turn down the volume on your phone until you're ready to speak. I think that the Zoom's sensing sound and it's changing the screen to whoever's making the sound. So if everybody could just help us out with that. I don't know how to like mute everybody. So if you can just self-mute yourselves, that would be really fantastic. Thank you, Chris, for that explanation. It was really fantastic and enlightening. And I did not know about the Idaho Statesman article that you just talked about, how it looked like most of the folks who were offering cash over were investors. Very likely.
Well, if you go back and you hear that, right? You hear,
yeah,
oh, I keep getting beat out, and these investors. And for the longest time, I was like, what are these investors? But they are literally people putting money into residential housing stock to get revenue, and it is happening. So
yeah. Okay, so has everybody turned their mutes on so that we're not hearing any background noise? I still see the telephone people still popping up. So specifically for you folks, please turn your volume down. Or if someone can tell me how to mute people, that would be fantastic, because I don't know how to do it. And I spent some time searching and I don't know. Does anyone know that they can
Can you right click on their name? Does it do anything when you right click on their name and then maybe you have an option?
Oh, yes, you're right. Okay, thank you. I did not know that.
Right click.
Okay.
It always saves you.
All right. Yes, you're right on that one. Okay. I think that might have solved the problem. So we'll go back to the speaker view and I'll ask the next question. What are the complaints that you're hearing from Boise residents, or what have you heard from folks you've talked to already?
A lot of the same things that were on that video. Really what it is for people hard to kind of come to grips is so I'm not going to know who my neighbor is. Like I like my neighbor. I want to know them. My kids play with their kids. They pick up my Amazon box on my doorstep. I take care of the house when they're gone. So that's one thing. The aspect of losing community, I mean, where do I live? I thought I was in a residential area. It was zoned residential. If my neighbor wanted to run a business, he would get a conditional use permit and it would go to public meeting and I could comment on that. None of that is there. It's people are doing it. So those are some things. When you look out neighborhood safety, I mean, we have kids in the neighborhood and we have people that are visiting and we don't know who they are. And there's a concern there. Loud parties, overflowing garbage receptacles, blocked public right-of-ways. We have dumpsters that are being left on the sidewalk for days on end. And it's actually right at the corner where all the kids walk to school. And so around that blind corner, the kids got to walk out in the street to get around the trash cans because the Airbnb owner doesn't live there. And that really gets pretty darn frustrating. And I have supporters who, they've moved the garbage can, then they're mad. They don't want to move the garbage can anymore. They're pissed. It's like, that kind of stuff. Dramatic property value increases. People very mad about, wondering, is that demand from this short-term rental market? If that demand wasn't there, would I see 3 investors offering $70,000 over asking? I don't think we would. They might just go to long-term, and that, you know what, go for it. Do long-term. I think that's a great thing for the community. And then the loss of long-term, that I get a lot of supporters. I get a lot of homeowners. I've got a lot of homeowners that own properties that have chosen to keep them long-term rentals, because when I've asked that, they say, well, where is so-and-so going to live? I have a person down my road. She has 2 daughters. Really? Okay, so where is she going to go? So there are people in this community, because we have a great community, that are actually taking far less money to keep people in. So that impact to long-term rentals is another one.
Great, thank you. The next one, I have a PowerPoint slide to go with it if we're interested in checking that out. So a lot of people, when I've been talking about short-term rentals over the last several years, will say, and this even was coming from City Hall, was like, well, you know, the state passed a law. We can't do anything. We've been preempted, etc. And so I hear this all the time. In fact, someone posted it on our Facebook page tonight about this discussion, and I had to clarify it for them. So for folks who don't know, this is, you know, it's a great excuse if you don't want to do something to just say, like, you can't do something. And this is what we've seen here in Boise. But if you look at the law, this is it right here. Are folks seeing my screen? I always forget if there's one more step.
Yeah, it looks, it's just coming up, but you gotta.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Let's see. I never remember how to make it bigger.
It seems like you're moving a black bar, or at least I have a black bar, like where your cursor is now. That.
Okay, I got it out of the way. Sorry,
Yeah.
that's the share screen thing.
Okay.
Does anyone remember how to make it bigger?
You say slideshow start.
Slideshow start.
Up top, right there. From beginning or whatever, from current slide maybe.
Oh, that's not quite the one. Okay, so here it is. All right, hopefully that's working out. I know it takes a couple seconds. So this is the law, HB 216. It was passed in 2017. I'm just going to read it. The Idaho bill exchanged a preemption against cities from outright banning short-term rentals in exchange for tax collection on bookings, while making it equally clear that cities retain the latitude to regulate short-term rentals in order to, quote, safeguard public health and welfare. It goes on to say, quote, a county or city may implement such reasonable regulations as it deems necessary to safeguard the public health, safety, and general welfare in order to protect the integrity of residential neighborhoods in which short-term rentals or vacation rentals operate. Tax collection. In Idaho, AirBnB agreed to collect and remit taxes, which in Boise included a 6% state sales tax, 2% travel and convention tax, and the 5% GBAD, Greater Boise Auditorium District tax. The law acknowledges the right of local governments to levy taxes either through the state tax commission or on their own via local option taxes. And I came across something today that showed, I think Haley or Ketchum, I think it was Ketchum, actually takes in money that they use to divert to affordable housing through their local option ability, which, you know, Boise does not have. So in the end, the law seems reasonable and even-handed. It clearly, you know, was brought by the industry, but it affirms the ability of local government to regulate and manage short-term rentals according to their own community standards while protecting homeowners from arbitrary bans.
Exactly.
So
very important.
Yeah, that's what you find out when you look into it. And then just one more thing while we're here, as I have this map that shows, this was in 2018 when I got this data, and this just shows all the Airbnbs at that time that were plotted on a map. So you can see there was around 1,145 in total, and then 906 that were unique so they were unique, they weren't duplicates, you know, on different platforms. So This is how many that are in Boise. When I first got this map, it was pretty shocking to me. This was in 2018, and we had no idea. Like, you know, if I would have thought how many there were in Idaho or in Boise, I would have said like 300. So to get like literally triple that was shocking to me. So that's that. Okay. Whoops, the wrong way.
Yeah, and I mean, I appreciate you bringing that up, because it's important for people to see that, because what you will hear, and what I heard as soon as I started looking into it was, oh no, you know, the state passed a law, you know, and then there's some finger pointing between political parties and all this stuff, and you know, we can't do anything, and you know, it took me one time reading it, and I got down to the second page and I was like, what, dude? What? I mean, like you said, it's not bad. What it said is a city can't just regulate you for no reason, which is good. Like, I don't want a city just saying, hey, Chris, I don't like what you're doing, so I'm going to tell you to stop. It said you can't do that. What it did say, though, is essentially, I think of it as an off-ramp. It's like, hey, we don't know where this thing is going, but obviously, if it becomes a big issue into public welfare, undermining the long-term rentals or housing, yeah, you can step in. And so it's very important to know that. And Boise is behind the curve. You know, it's not a political thing. I mean, we have conservative counties, you know, Bonner County, Valley County with ordinances. We have Rexburg, Idaho, pretty conservative over there. They have short-term rental laws. McCall, Sandpoint. And so when you hear people say this, don't let them say it. That law did not preclude city and residents to say something that it's impacting it and have a you know, do something about it.
Right. Good point. Let's shout it from the mountaintops.
Right.
Okay.
Can we touch on some of the regulations?
Yeah.
By chance? Okay. Just
whatever.
Because I don't want people thinking we're reinventing the wheel. I mean, this whole thing for me is, okay, let's do some discovery. Let's see what other people are doing, and let's see what they've learned. So in Idaho, we have counties and cities that require registration with the city, require public safety inspections to make sure they meet code, not renting out rooms that they shouldn't. Notifying neighbors. Wouldn't that be nice that you actually had to go and tell a couple neighbors that, hey, I'm converting this into a hotel. You need to have a permit, and you have to post the permit on your advertisement. That way the city can say, oh, that's a legal one, that's the illegal one. The problem is in Denver, Colorado passed a bill in December that fines the platforms $1,000 a day if they list a property without a permit. It's a big battle. Like I said, Boise is nowhere close to the issues other cities have been dealing with. And then restricting the number of investor-owned short-term rentals. That's being done as well.
Great. So I know short-term rentals have been a hot topic in Boise for over the last few years. Can you tell us what you know has been done so far?
Unfortunately, not much, but there was an attempt, and people might know, in 2019, Mayor Beater proposed some regulations. Essentially, same thing, permitting, required owners to live on site, so owner occupied. When I looked into this, and I remember my wife and I taking the survey, and it was like, you know, do you want a investor on Airbnb next to you? And it was like, no. And then the survey results come back, and it was a slim majority said, we don't want any regulations. And my wife and I are like, dang, like, what world are we, you know, this seems odd that people want to not know their neighbor. But what I found was there's strong pushback from special interest groups. I guess a local group in Boise was the Boise Regional Realtors, and they actually did a call to action for all their members to say, oppose this. And so they did. I talking with realtors now, I think a lot of them see that this, is an issue, and that, we're all in this community together. They're living, selling homes in beautiful neighborhoods, and we're living in them. I don't think any of them want to sell a home to someone and say, oh yeah, and then we're going to advocate that an investor can buy a home. So I think a lot's changed since then, but I will say that did happen. Mayor McLean, during her campaign, she said, and I quote, "I've spent a lot of time looking at the issue in other cities, judging from the things I've been hearing all year from renters. Short-term rentals are emerging as a growing problem in Boise." She goes on to say, "That is why I made short-term rental licensing and regulation a part of my Housing for People platform in early August, pledging to work on this issue as mayor, not taking 'we can't' for an answer." So McLean was asked about that comment for the Boise Dev article that was published a week or two ago. And she said, "If you remember, I've talked about and will continue to talk about creating a common sense way to know who has short-term rentals, where they are, and to help us collect some data to determine how they're impacting our rental market." In Mayor McLean's transitional report, it says, acknowledges that short-term rentals may be a threat to long-term affordable housing. So the good news is it does seem like there's traction. I know there's going to be an incredible amount of pushback from the industry, but I truly do believe that if, the residents can say what they would like to see, I do believe the mayor will listen to them, listen to the residents, kind of per her statements during the campaign. So that's good news.
Yeah, definitely. The tide is changing. If people are concerned about the impacts of investor-owned short-term rentals, what do you recommend they do to help to get the city of Boise to take action on this?
Well, what I'm learning, I learned fairly quickly, is, to really get people to talk to you, you need to have the help of other people. So I would urge people to Google Protect Boise Neighborhoods, and you can say that you support this effort. That just helps myself and the other members when they talk to city council or the mayor to say, hey, it's not just me, it's all these other people, and then we can actually get somewhere. So I would say to do that, definitely tell your neighbors and friends that, hey, this is going on, this is an issue. You can find all sorts of articles on our website and go to the Twitter page. We have a yard sign campaign going on. And then I would really recommend if you could just take 10 minutes and send an email to the mayor and just say, you know what? I want to see legislation to protect the integrity of Boise neighborhoods for both homeowners and renters alike. It takes all of us to kind of work in this democracy. And if we don't say it, it will not, get done. So those are my recommendations.
Right. Great ideas. And I will just echo those. I think that the folks at Protect Boise Neighborhoods are doing a really good job. They've got a fantastic website, and you can join up with their effort on their website. There's a form. You could tell your story if you have experience with short-term rentals in your neighborhood. And how do folks get a lawn sign, Chris?
They can just go to our webpage, and then in the comment box, you can just let us know. Okay. And we're on a budget, but we have some people donating, or if you would like to purchase one for $10, I know it's kind of lame, but they can do that. Either way, they can get one.
They cost money.
I know. Yeah.
I've been there.
Go figure.
Yeah. Okay, so with that, we're just going to open it up. I'm just going to ask folks, since we have a lot of people on this call, more than we've had before, just maybe raise your hand, and then maybe I'll call on folks who have questions. We'll see if that's the best way to do it. Let's see. Does anyone have a burning question for Chris? We can look at some more PowerPoint slides if you want. I've got a couple more.
I'm trying to raise my hand, but I can't figure it out.
Oh, that's okay. That's
Oh, here it
okay.
is. Here it is. I see it over here now.
Okay.
Can I raise my hand? Here, I'll do this.
There, yeah, do it manually.
Okay. I have a couple of questions, but I guess I'll start with the one that kind of puzzles me in Boise. It surprises me that it's more profitable than getting a long-term rental, at least like in the average situation. I'm just kind of, in New Orleans, I can see it. I can see it in a highly tourist kind of destination, and maybe Boise is becoming that, and I'm just not aware of that. But if I just kind of run the numbers in my head, I think like, wow, you'd have to have occupancy, like 2/3 of the time, and maybe they do. Is that kind of, have you gotten a sense of how it pencils out, or maybe also it's that investors also wouldn't have to deal with the long-term leases and wouldn't have to deal with what the apartment industry calls the 3 T's: termites, tenants, and toilets, right? I mean, maybe that's part of it. But I'm just curious as to what you.
Yeah, I mean, I will be honest. I've heard investors say I make less money doing it, and I've actually heard them say I make more, and if I had to do long term, I couldn't afford it. But here's the numbers. Using that AirDNA data, average daily rate of $131. Okay, average occupancy rate of 60%. So if you take that and you multiply it, you get 30,000, and what you get is $2,600 a month.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what I find interesting is then I look at long-term rentals, and I'm seeing how they're starting to kind of close the gap. So yeah, but that's data. I mean, that was data they gave us. So that's median. That's your average price, average occupancy.
That's local data?
Right. That's
wow.
Local data based on 900.
Yeah.
Wow. That's COVID numbers too. So yeah, we'll see where it is next year. But yeah, those are the numbers. So.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Great question, Richard. We're open up for other questions. Does anyone else have anything? They can make a statement as well. Marissa.
Mine's more just a comment. I've stayed in Airbnbs and VRBOs, before, and never really thought about the impact that those have on the community. But anyhow, just learning about all this, it really makes me reconsider and, just do the hotel route, because I don't want to cause a problem in someone else's community. So have you come across other people that have changed their behavior as they've learned about this?
I mean, we have, but yeah, I mean, if you can get people past you're not trying to kick someone out of their home and get to the investor, it gets pretty easy for them to at least say, you know what, I'm going to look at that option of a homeowner renting out their room or their home for a week. And if I can go that route, maybe I will. So that's definitely something easy. Because I mean, I will say there's some good things. It's just, there's other times where it's not so good. But yeah, for most people, they're very surprised. And yeah, and that's kind of what I'm always trying to get. It's it's very new to people, and it's good to just think, oh no, it's fine. Everyone's helping everyone out, but it's a big market, and so I think it's just important that if you think that isn't great, that you voice it, or maybe you change your pattern of what you're doing.
Well, and I think it's important to point out that originally it was it was that proverbial like little old lady who necessarily couldn't make her mortgage and she needed the extra, or somebody who had an ADU on their property, so they were using it for a vacation or to send their kid to college. But as it has grown, and it literally, I mean, it's now in December, it became an IPO. It went public. It's valued at like $100 billion, bigger than the 4 largest hotel chains combined. It's become something else entirely, right? And so now it's just like a massive corporation, and the biggest profits are by a lot of the large, real estate moguls, essentially, people who, this is their entire industry and income. And so it's important to look at sort of the difference of, just the small mom and pop operation and the large investors. And, a lot of the regulations try to like thread that needle where it's just like, we want to make sure the regulations don't disallow the little old lady and the family putting their kid through college. But the target is to discourage that kind of strip mining of neighborhoods by a large out-of-state, oftentimes, or just large real estate groups and investors from, getting involved in our neighborhoods. So
I have one more question. And maybe you covered this. Sorry, my kid was distracting me for part of it. But has the hotel industry weighed in on this as far as like a loss of revenue from their perspective?
I haven't dug into that too much, other than to say typically the pro Airbnb will sometimes say anyone that's pushing back on it works for the hotel industry. I know, but I haven't done a lot of research. I do believe it has, yes, but usually that's what I hear is, oh, he's, so-and-so is getting paid by the hotel industry. So because that's happening, I think it must impact them, but they're located in areas that are appropriate for hotels, whereas, our neighborhoods, not necessarily appropriate, I don't think, for, new people every 2 days. And I guess I want to make the point, it's short-term rental platforms. There's a lot of platforms. It's not one in particular. It's that idea, and that's key, because I don't know if you guys have noticed the VRBO advertisement push, but maybe it's because I Google it so much, but I get those ads all the time. So there is a lot of money pouring in. So.
Richard looks like he has another question.
Yes, thank you. I'm just doing it the old-fashioned way. Yeah, I think this whole idea of using algorithms, using software techniques, using means of aggregating and bundling and essentially kind of abstracting, huge amounts of data. And you touched on that. In order to kind of sell residential single-family homes on a broad financial kind of platform where investors can, you can live anywhere around the world and you don't have to know anything, about where you're buying a house. You might just be able to buy a share of a house now at this point. It is becoming, I think it's hard to fathom the impact that this kind of these financial tools can have on any kind of market. And it's really odd to think of it as having such an impact on a, where we live, housing, something that, land, something that's very intimately connected to our lives. But I think that just that in and of itself is a real catalyst for, kind of getting investor money and speculator money kind of into a neighborhood. But as far as the question goes, you mentioned that some of the regulations attempted to limit the number of investor-owned properties or short-term rentals. Do you know how that's done? What kind of mechanism is it? Is it like in a certain area, a certain number, and it's first come, first serve? Or that's how billboards are apparently. You know, there's only so many billboards you can have in Boise. I just learned this because my neighborhood's a great target for billboards. And if somebody else, you know, somebody has to sell the right to a billboard before another company or the same company could build another one. So maybe it's kind of like that, or liquor licenses or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I do believe it fits under public welfare under that state law. So, and then how they come up with that number, you know, I don't know. I guess I don't know. It's got to be based on a reasonable number they think won't, you know, negatively impact the public welfare ability. But, you know, Mayor Beater proposed that only owner occupied. So it sounds like, you know, that law does provide options, but I don't know I don't know the specifics, how they came up with that. But you're probably right. It is kind of like a billboard. We got this many of them, and until that person leaves, yeah, you got to wait your turn.
Also like liquor licenses.
Yeah.
Right.
David had his hand up. David, did you have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Well, Marissa kind of asked it, but maybe I can build on what her question was getting at. Chris, we've seen the emphasis on revitalization of downtown under the previous mayor and the tremendous building of new hotels. I think we have about 9 new hotels over the past 5 years downtown, and many of them are looking pretty empty at the moment. Is this a teachable moment with the hotel industry to build some kind of a bridge? I'm sure they don't want to see the hotel district migrate into neighborhoods as it has been doing. Do you have any more thoughts on how we can emphasize that the move of lodging into neighborhoods is actually undercutting the effort to revitalize downtown Boise?
I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely worth looking into. Like I said, I think you have to be careful and be ready for someone to say, oh, you're getting paid. But if you can get beyond that, you know, residents work at hotels. They work at every part of the hotel. So those are jobs. And so, yeah, I think that would be something that we probably could try to get a little bit of data on that. Another angle, which I think a lot of you are probably well more versed in this than me, but, you know, the city is investing significant time, money, and city-owned land in dealing with affordable housing. And which, you know, it's a case-by-case thing for me. But if they're going to leave a tool on the table, which is regulating, you know, investor-owned short-term rentals prior to you know, selling the city's boneyard and rebuilding a new one, I don't know. I just think they need to look into what their tools are. So maybe that's something else that if people had an idea, you know, that we could look into that, because that is a significant amount of money that the taxpayers are paying for. I'm not saying it isn't a good effort. I'm saying it, just because that might be easier than taking this issue on, I don't think is fair to the taxpayer, to be honest.
I think that's probably a terrific gateway to our next speaker, Eric Kingston. And he works in the affordable housing sphere. And so he probably has some thoughts about that. And I think that he might want to share some slides with us. So
if there's time, I'm happy to do that. I wanted to address that question about that Chris I think brought up. You know, how do you regulate it? How are communities, say in a state like Idaho, dealing with this issue? And in working with a few communities around the state, like Sandpoint, for instance, they passed an ordinance that said you can't have more than, you can't have an STR, short-term rental, within 350 feet of another one. So they tried to, kind of spread them out a little bit and keep them from being concentrated in a certain, to create ghost neighborhoods, with a lot of vacant units here and there. I think they also require that whoever's managing it have somebody that can be on site in 20 minutes if there's an emergency. And I think at the time they passed the ordinance, they limited ownership to no more than 2 units per individual or organization. So I'm not sure if they've had to, modify that in the interim, but I presented at the APA conference a few years ago with Aaron Qualls, who was the planner, kind of city administrator up there, and he kind of presented that information at the time. But yeah, I think I think what you're referencing, Chris, is that kind of police powers that cities have, which is, if they need to protect the health and safety and welfare of their constituents. So I think, is that kind of what you were thinking about?
Right. Yeah. We need justifiable reasons to use that, which I think we have them. And it sounds like Sandpoint is using that, and there's other towns that I mentioned using it. So
there's actually a Supreme Court case that I think is sort of implicated here, but it'd be pretty tough to get the current Supreme Court to uphold this. But the first fair housing case that was heard by the Supreme Court was Traficante versus Metropolitan Life. And in that case, there were 2 white tenants in an apartment complex that filed a complaint against the apartment owner and the property managers because there was a pattern and practice of discriminating against people of color and people with disabilities. And these tenants claimed that deprived them of the opportunity to live in a diverse community. And the 2 lower courts that heard the case said they didn't have standing, but the Supreme Court said, reversed those and said, yeah, they did have standing. So that was kind of an interesting case. And the reason I think it's kind of a nice kind of thought experiment here is if you look at spec investment is really driving diversity out of neighborhoods by virtue of inflation and displacement. And so neighborhoods like in Boise, where I live in the East End, we bought our house back in the 90s. Neither we nor any of our neighbors could afford to live in that neighborhood now if we were trying to move into it. And it used to be, we had a lot of students there and a lot more diversity than we do now. And that's all been kind of driven out by spec investment. And so I don't know, if you want to see a couple of these slides, it's about the concept of public subsidy to private equity, that happens when you have spec investors come in and there are externalized costs that are shifted onto the community in order for those investors to make money and basically extract wealth from the community. The rest of us are kind of left holding the bag and paying higher taxes and dealing with increased homelessness.
Yes, please.
Okay, we'll see if it works. Those coming through okay?
Yes.
So just to kind of give some background on this, this is a presentation I gave with these other folks at the Rocky Mountain Land Use Institute last year. It was the last conference I went to before I came down with all the symptoms of COVID. It was a year ago this week that we were there. And so Jessie Dexter is no longer with BSU, but she was the person in charge of helping students that were housing and food insecure. Jennifer Newcomer was with the Shift Research Lab, and they're the ones that came up with the model to calculate foregone spending as a result of housing cost burdens, which means when people have housing cost burden, they have less money to invest in taxable goods and services or to invest in the economy and purchase other things. So it's a net loss to the local economy and the state economy. And by their estimates, Idaho lost $670 million in 2018 alone due to foregone spending tied to housing cost burden. which I thought was kind of a significant amount. And then Stephen Miller, who's a law professor, he had a presentation on that too, but I'll just show you my slides. And I'll kind of just run through these really quick. And I think I can send you a link, Lori, to this presentation so we don't have to spend a lot of time on it. But and I won't read all this stuff to you because I know you guys can read if anybody wants me to read it. I'm happy to do that. But so, I like to kind of avoid talking about, affordable housing because that's a trigger for a lot of people in Idaho. So I talk about, making sure you have a range of housing types and price points that reflect the needs of everyone in the community, from essential workers to retirees and seniors and students and families and so forth. And then this is sort of, kind of, I think Lori's really familiar with a lot of these concepts. We've had lots of conversations about this stuff over the years, but the idea of local control of your housing stock as being really essential. And it's part of, it's not just your housing stock, but your heritage. So, we have a lot of historic buildings in Boise that have been taken over by outside investors, and that takes away that local control, and you lose, you kind of lose your destiny that way. But anyway, these are just some principles that I think are, kind of important to keep in mind when it comes to housing. This is from, I was part of the United Way of Treasure Valley Community Assessment 2020 last year, and this was the finding in looking at all the social influencers of health. Housing was number one. It was the root from which all other indicators of health sprang. So you can kind of get a sense of that, but you guys all know that because you're here. So, and then this is something I like to really reinforce with planners, and I think it's important for, it resonates with planners because they all have to sort of, I don't know if they take an oath or cross their heart or something like that when they do this, but this is what they're supposed to be doing. And recognizing a special responsibility to plan for the needs of disadvantaged groups and persons. And I know a group that I'm presenting with tomorrow, we're kind of talking about changing the term disadvantaged because that's a little judgy. And a lot of people don't like that. But anyway, it's something to think about when you deal with planning professionals. And I think most planning professionals I know are really conscious of that. So I mentioned externalized costs, and when you think about the net profit of housing speculation, there is a cost. It's just not on the books. Those cards are not on the table for everybody to see. And so I just use these analogies like a Superfund site where a mining company may have taken the profits out of the hill and then left the communities kind of holding the bag for a Superfund cleanup and all the health costs and environmental costs of that. This is the Silver Valley. This is bringing down the smelter in Kellogg and Wallace area. And then, think of other externalized costs of like opioid addiction and, cigarette smoke and oil spills and things like that. So I'm trying to sort of equate, all of this together so we understand like putting all the cards on the table when you think of the net cost of housing policy. And it's not to judge or, one way or the other, it's just to say, be informed about what the consequences are. And then this is sort of talking about the short-term rentals. I call, there's conversions and we all know about rent evictions that are happening all over the place. And so I just like to say, it's a lot better to try and preserve the housing that we have, preserving that legacy affordability. It's like patching the holes in your leaky bucket before you try to fill the bucket with water. I'll just kind of breeze through these. You guys can just kind of see those headlines. This just points to a lot of the single family homes that were previously owner occupied that were bought up by spec investors and turned into high cost rentals. And then there's a nod to the film Push that we tried to bring that here, and I was able to finally see it was great. Really good film. And you recognize these guys. Again, it's that the cost of displacement is put onto the community. And some of you may have seen this chart. This is from Jesse Tree that just shows the big spike in first-time homelessness starting in 2016. And I think that's really when we start to see kind of an uptick in Airbnbs and short-term rentals and conversions and more spec investment coming into the area. And then this shows you the difference between an increase in owner-occupied single-family and non-owner occupied single family housing for that period of time. So you can see that's more outside kind of remote control of housing, represented in that number. And there's that court case I mentioned, Traficante. That's it.
Great. That was very enlightening. I really appreciate you bringing that. Yeah, externalities and the collateral damage of spec investment is really important to discuss. And I'm glad you brought that into the conversation tonight. So we don't have too much time left. We have about 13 minutes. So I'm going to go around. Does anyone have any questions for Eric first before we move on? I think that was some great information that he presented, and so I want to make sure. Richard?
I'd just like to say, I think that bringing up the externalities like you do is a really good talking point. I try to, I think there's like a group of young conservatives actually in this country who are open to that idea when it comes to environmental things. It is a conservative idea, that it should, at least traditionally conservative, in the sense that one would pay their way. You don't just dump, your externalized costs onto the rest of society. A business only makes the money that it should make, and not by degrading the rest of society. So anyway, I just think that's a really good talking point, and we should continue to use it, because it's not a left or a right issue, really, even though it may be seen. Yeah. Anyway.
No, there's definitely some economic harm that occurs from housing cost burden.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I just want to say, thanks, Eric. It's nice seeing, data. That's the problem with all this is, there's intrinsic value of things that we care about, but we can't put a price onto. And if we have to reach out and do kind of what you're saying, that's getting to that bottom line. That's definitely seems like an effective way to get people's attention. And it seems pretty straightforward to me. So thank you for sharing that.
You bet.
Other questions that people have?
Lori, can you hear me? It's Erica.
Yeah, Erica.
This is a question for Eric. I didn't see the last few slides because my screen froze up, so I hope this wasn't covered in there. But just this last August, the Office of Performance Evaluation for the Legislature produced a book called Preparedness of Idahoans to Retire. And it cited the U.S. government accounting office that says 1/3 to 2/3 of retirees won't be able to maintain their standard of living when they retire. So I'm wondering, Eric, in the discussions that you have, across the state and so forth, does that longer term issue come up in terms of we will have more and more people relying on safety net programs, and that cost, if we keep not doing things to prevent more and more people from not being able to afford a roof over their head, or being placed in situations where that roof over their head is a ever moving target, where the price is going up every year because we aren't providing lower cost, stable housing options. So does that long-term view come up in your discussions?
It does. I run a housing hotline, and I'm just one of a lot of people that answer phones that hear from people that are housing insecure. But in the last couple of years, a lot of the calls I'm getting are from mostly women in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. And they're basically being forced out of their long-term residential units because of an outside investor that comes in and buys the property. And you know, they don't have any place to go when the rental vacancy rate is close to 0%. And I'm also hearing from, you know, like one of the slides I featured a Statesman article that had a picture of a woman named Becky. And Becky called me a few years ago, and she was pretty upset. She was being priced out of her house that she'd owned outright for years. She'd been in the same house for about 40 years. And her property taxes were going up so much because of all the spec development and, you know, houses being scraped and replaced with $1 million, you know, houses around her. And she was in the East End, and so she was essentially not able. She was having to decide whether she could pay property tax or buy food and you know, pay for medical stuff. And you know, so that's an issue too. And I think that's happening all over the state, where you see that those values going way up really fast. And I think there's a lot of talk about how to control that inflation. It's kind of hard to sort it all out, but it's an issue, and it's impacting people who, you know, in her case, she said, I bought into the American dream, but if I own my house, that would be my security in retirement. And she said, how dare these people around me treat my neighborhood like a game of Monopoly and drive me out of the house that I purchased and in good faith. So, you know, in the neighborhood she loved and where she raised her kids, and then she was being forced out. She was not happy.
Oh, I can only imagine. And I mean,
Yeah.
it crosses my mind wondering if what all I've done to try to plan and prepare all end up in the same spot, even if you try to do everything, you know, the way you're supposed to.
And I think, you know, Chris and some other folks have indicated that, you know, that one of the options that sort of, you know, drives people to maybe rent part of their house as an Airbnb or a short-term rental is they might be in that position where they need to cover their property taxes and insurance in a case like Becky's, or they, you know, they have the ability to kind of create an ADU, which is even better. But yeah, there's a lot of different strategies. There is a group kind of organized by BSU that's focused on multi-generational housing, so more house sharing and kind of cooperative living arrangements for seniors that may need some help and maybe need some rent, and students or other folks that need a place to live.
Thank you.
Looks like we have another hand raised. Bob, do you want to ask your question? Do you know how to unmute yourself? Bob,
Okay.
are you there? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we hear you.
I'm new to this, and I'm just sort of sitting in here now and that type of thing. I don't know how to get my camera working.
That's okay. We're almost wrapped up. So if you're just
okay.
being up, that's fine too.
Okay, we'll let it pass.
Okay. Did you have a question?
No, I did not.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's good to chat.
Okay. And if you want to get your video going, on the bottom it has the second thing in says start video. If you click on that, it'll start.
Okay, I'll have to find it.
Okay. I'm going to remute you. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? Richard, did you have another question?
No, I was waving to Bob since I saw him in his video.
You're here, Bob. You made it. Woo woo. I guess I'm gonna show a couple other slides that I have. So this one is just a kind of a collection of headlines around the country of most other cities around the country and the world, you know, as Airbnb has grown, have, you know, grappled with how to regulate them to ensure, you know, the integrity of neighborhoods and that there's housing available for local workers. And so here's just a sampling of headlines from newspapers across the country. And tourist towns have a particular issue with short-term rentals. I'd love for Eric to jump in. Tell me again what those statistics that you have on McCall are. They're pretty shocking. Eric.
So, and I put a link in the chat to the Cascade Community Review Report, and I think it starts on page 40, the housing section, and then page 44, I've got some information on STRs in Valley County. But when we did that review initially in 2016, there 72% of the housing stock in Valley County was either a vacation home or a short-term rental, and it's up to 80% now. So that means that only 2 out of 10 homes in that valley are available to people who live and work locally.
Right. Yeah.
And they're trying some interesting strategies. Andrew Mentzer up there with the West Central Mountain Economic Development Council, they're working hard on some strategies to mitigate some of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember you telling me that a few years ago, and I found that so shocking. Here's another one, Lava Hot Springs. This was a really fantastic article that was in the paper a few years ago. And click on the next slide to read some of the text from it. So most of the people moving into town really only want vacation homes. One local real estate agent said 8 out of 10 people who ask her about buying a home are looking for second homes. And most of those people are also looking to rent out the homes when they're not around. This has resulted in a conflict over housing. There isn't enough for people who live there, and even those who manage to snatch up a house will likely be paying much higher mortgages than they would have 2 years ago. And of course, you know, as is everywhere, they have a problem with people, outside buyers, paying with cash. And then this is a whole other issue. You know, you've got to think about the impact on infrastructure. So some of the residents of Lava are leaving, especially families with young children. And this has resulted in the Lava Hot Springs Elementary School's student population decreasing from 152 students in 1996 to a low of 64 students in 2018, making many town residents scared that the school will shut down. In these communities, schools are really the hub of the community because there are activities and things going on that people attend at Christmas time and during the school year that brings identity. But if you were to lose that because you don't have any families here with kids, then you just kind of lose your identity as a town that raises families along with tourism. So I found that a really great article and worth sharing. So I will put a link to it in the underneath the Facebook post on this for the video if folks are interested in reading the entire thing. And we'll do another round of questions. It's 9 o'clock right now, so this is typically when we end. So we'll just see if anyone else has any questions or if Chris has some concluding statements for us tonight. So anyone else have a burning question before we wrap it up? If not, and then Chris, did you have anything to say?
Yeah, I'm off mute. Yeah, just thanks again. And thanks for you guys to listen to this. I actually learned quite a bit too. And it sounds like a few of you learned a little bit about what I had to say. I think it all plays together, right? And it's not going to be one thing, but if we could make a effort at something that might help a little, that would be good. And then go from there. So yeah, I urge you, if you want to be a part of the effort that we have going on, that, you check out our webpage and at least tell your neighbors what's going on and try to get past that. We're not trying to kick retired folks out of their homes because they want to rent their room. We're talking about investors. And Eric, you have a lot more knowledge, and the scope is way bigger than even what I was showing. So it really needs to be addressed. So thank you, everyone. And you can contact me or the other supporters through that comment box. If you do that, one of us will, get back to you. So thank you.
Great. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming, speaking to us, Chris, and presenting your information. Eric, coming in as well with your great slideshow and information about affordable housing, and everybody who comes and attends these things. It's so great. I can't tell you how awesome it has been to see and interact and engage with folks after several months of not doing that due to COVID. So we'll be back next Thursday. We don't have a guest lined up yet, but we will work on something for next Thursday. You'll probably hear it by Tuesday of next week. And we'll do this again then. So thanks again, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.